If you or someone you know is experiencing a suicidal crisis or emotional distress, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255.
Back Home Media.
Pastors are not mental health experts, okay?
Yes.
Pastors
No,
and, religious administrators and things like that. Yes, I believe that, they want to help and they want to support. And there are spaces and times where they can, and it is helpful. But pastors are not mental health experts.
Hi, welcome back to Something's Wrong. I am a guest host for today, Tylor Montgomery, and I run another show as well that is featured on Back Home Media called Religion Recovery. So if you ever get a chance, go check out our show as well, as I've been a guest on this one already, and I have loved the content on it. And I wanted to bring on one of my regulars on my show as well that has become a regular, thank goodness, and it is none other than Julie Orona. And we have her in the house today. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you, Tyler. Good morning. I'm so privileged to be here. I'm excited to talk about this content today, truly. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you for joining me again and putting up with my craziness. So thank you. I view it as an honor to be able to host this thing because I know I'm at least effed up enough to be able to ask other people if they're effed up too. So it's like no better person maybe to host it right now.
No judgment. When you and I do podcasts together, usually we have like a debriefing of some sort, before we do the content, we'll do bullet points or something like this is what we want to touch on. And we didn't even do that for this because I feel like you and I have so much experience and knowledge about this content. I feel like we could just talk for days about mental health and anxiety and how it affects us and how it affects the world and the stigma around it and all that. So I'm ready to go.
We've with us both being raised in the church kind of world and culture, it really does make it a plethora of different anxiety and social issues that we could discuss. So yes,
I feel like we could discuss this totally secularly on this show, and then we could actually discuss this very specifically on the Religion Recovery podcast.
Okay, I like that. Part 1, part 2. Check out part 2 on Religion Recovery. I like that idea. I would love to have a continuation of this too.
Yes, I agree. And I mean, I'm sure some of the religious doctrine and things are going to come up even in this content because it is, for me personally, I feel like my very conservative fundamentalist Christian upbringing is a lot of why I started having anxiety at such a young age. And so we'll talk about that content here too, some I'm sure, but yeah, I would be totally down to talk very specifically about, spiritual and religious trauma and anxiety and those kinds of things in that context as well. Because I think there's tons of it. There's just tons of content to cover there.
There's like so much that needs to be unpacked from religious traumatic things dealing with today's episode title, which we're calling Anxiety Junkies. And as usual on the show here, I wanted to start off with just our first question, which of course, just based on the show, when did you realize that something was wrong dealing with anxiety or maybe being an anxiety junkie? And by that, I just mean like we're addicted to the same kind of high that we get from being stressed out about things in our life. We get that kind of edge, that adrenaline pumping, where it's that kind of feeling that we keep going back to. Like, why do we fall back into that stuff? And when did you realize that something was wrong?
Well, first of all, I want to say our culture perpetuates this. Our capitalism in and of itself produces, this high that you're talking about. And I can relate to that in my own kind of personal way, is like, you're constantly supposed to be, producing and consuming and, meeting goals and getting better and being quote unquote successful and just more. And so like that, in your career, I know I can definitely, as a parent, I can also relay all of those, tendencies towards parenting too. Like, you're just constantly supposed to be doing all the time. And this environment that we've created where it's looked at so negatively, to, slow down, to take time for yourself, to do self-care, to, do things for yourself that you need to do so that you don't burn out. It's really looked down on in corporate America, and just and I feel in our culture in general. I do feel that there's a shift happening, though. I do feel that there is a kind of a slow progress towards, because mental health is a huge subject now, and it's great. It needs to be. We need to have these awarenesses. We need to be having these conversations. So I just want to say, first off, I just want to name that we exist in an environment and a culture and a society that perpetuates anxiety and perpetuates constantly producing and consuming. And if you're not doing those things, then you're bad, then you're lazy, then you're not, everybody wants to label things like, well, are you, is this successful? Are you successful? And what is success? It's potentially different to every person, but I think the overall feeling of that is like, do you work 60 hours a week? Do you have a 6-figure paycheck? Are you killing yourself every moment you have free time to be like investing in and doing crafts and, taking your kids to things and stuff like that? I mean, so much of what we do is just judged on our ability to produce and consume. And I feel like it's definitely time that we start addressing this. Late stage capitalism is the root of all evil. Like, free market capitalism is the root of all evil, as far as I'm concerned. It's just like this perpetual, you're never good enough. It's never enough. Nothing is ever enough. You're never supposed to feel full or satisfied or content. You're always supposed to be reaching for the next thing. And so, of course, we all have these, anxiety complexes, where we're just like, because it's also a performance-based thing too, and that's, for me, that really ties into kind of, the spiritual trauma and the religious upbringing that you and I were, kind of brought up into. I feel very much that, in the fundamentalist Christian doctrine, you're taught that you always have to be avoiding sin and always have to be preaching, the evangelical kind of side of things. Like, you're always supposed to be witnessing, and you're always supposed to be, giving God the glory, and you're never allowed to say like, yeah, I did that. I was successful in that. It's all got to be
so true.
That was God. I had nothing to do with that, and then also, just this perpetual, again, like, even within that religion and that faith is just, there's so much performance-based love. And that's scary. That's where the toxicity, really, really comes into play. And that's where I feel, people who have like these really deep anxiety complexes, and I'm one of them. And I feel like I could say that you probably are too, Tyler. Yeah, just these really, really deep seated anxiety complexes, just based on our culture. And then, kind of the most common or normal religion that many of us in America grow up with or exposed to or are forced into, there's just so much of that performance-based love, and that is so toxic, and so with the anxiety piece of that is like, I constantly have to be performing. I constantly have to be perfect. Not to say you're not allowed to sin or anything like that, but it's something that you're constantly being aware of. Like, is this, am I following God's plan? Is this what God wants? And you're then you get into this thing of like, where you don't trust your own choices. You're just constantly, Yeah, yeah, you're just constantly judging your own experience of the world. And that is so
Hmm.
toxic. And it's so sad because our experience of the world is what allows us to evolve and those experiences that we have in the world where we fail, where we make mistakes, where we quote unquote sin, whatever. Those are the things that help us learn and grow. And there's just in the religious, community, there's just such fear around, those things. And it creates a really, really intense kind of anxiety provoking just core response in a person. And I can definitely speak for myself. But to go back to your original question, when did I know something was wrong? Man, I feel like that question, it's hard to answer because I feel like it for me personally, it's been a progress. It's been a
Hmm.
journey. It wasn't at all a situation where I just woke up one day and was like, oh, this isn't normal. Function. I shouldn't be stressed out all the time. I shouldn't be like, so anxious to the point that I'm like, in a fetal position in the corner writhing because I don't have control over something that I was never meant to have control over to begin with, So, but I think honestly, the first time I was really able to kind of name, I took the rose-colored glasses off and I was able to name, oh, there's a different way to exist. There's a different way to just exist in the world. And there's a different way that I can have a different relationship with myself and the world around me. And it wasn't even like an awareness that I had. It was, when I left the church and when I started following my own path and I started naming my authenticity, I'm a member of the LGBTQ community, just, yeah.
Same here.
When you
Absolutely.
start living in authenticity, when you start being the real you, something happens. A lot of those anxiety traits, a lot of those characters that maybe your characteristics you've kind of carried your whole life, they actually diminish, and in some cases they actually stop. And so when I went on that journey of self-acceptance and self-authenticity and self-love and all that stuff, I was on the other side of it for the very first time in my life. Like, I'm not afraid of everything anymore. I don't feel like I have to have control of everything anymore. I don't feel like I have to prove myself constantly. I finally came to an understanding of, the spiritual space that I'm in now is just really, God is with me. I am God. God is me. It's non-dual wisdom, basically, is the spiritual kind of title that I give my spiritual thinking now, is just me and God are really the same thing. He exists in me and of me and through me and vice versa. We are the universe experiencing itself, however you want to name that. And all of these stipulations that we put on ourselves to be quote unquote good, quote unquote successful, they're all lies. It's all lies. None of it's true. None of it is really what makes a person or gives you your value. Your value is yours just by being here, just by breathing, just by experiencing the world around you. Like, you are a beautiful, precious person with beautiful, precious experiences. And it's very sad to think how much, people are judged and shamed and feel like they have no ability to be themselves because they're constantly trying to like always reach these goals, always do the next thing. And then once you get there, then what do you do? Okay, now you're thinking about the next thing. There's no presence. There's no ability to actually sit still and, honor or value or respect, your experiences or experiences around you or the world around you. So for me, it was when I started living in authenticity, I just started experiencing the other side of the spectrum without me necessarily naming anxiety or trying or anything like that. When you start living in authenticity, you're really breaking out of that bondage of fear, of all these things that you're expected to be or what you think you have to be to look good for your family, to look good for your religion, to look good for your career, whatever. When I started living on the other side of that, I just kind of experienced that there was something else. And then I was able to name, oh, living in anxiety like that is not normal. I should not be feeling like that 24/7. That's toxic. And it's harmful. It's harmful to me, and even harmful to the people around me, So for me, I was making moves in the right direction. And then the awareness came afterwards. for me.
And that kind of leads us to kind of into a little bit further discussion on it too, which is like give us your journey on being an anxiety addict, like most of us are. Like, detail for us, like when was the moment where it's almost like I'm trying to think in Zen terms as well, because it's that moment of like, if you're not familiar with the audience, if you're not familiar with like Zen Buddhism and everything like that, and Zen meditation, like Zen meditation is not necessarily a religious meditation. It's something that is something secular, that can be secular, that doesn't need to be involved with religion whatsoever, that they ring this bell. And this is kind of like where I was coming up with this a little bit earlier when I was thinking of the show. I was like, whenever I hear that freaking bell, the gong noise at the beginning of like a meditation thing, it's Zen has trained, and it trains your brain in order to freaking start being present as soon as you hear a noise. And the thing is, it's weird, and maybe I'm like freaking Pavlov's dog here or whatever, but whenever I hear it, I'm like, oh shit, I need to be present. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's a reminder for me, where like the entire time we were talking about that, I was just thinking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad that I have freaking like alert set up. Like, I have certain limits set up where something tells me internally, again, without religion, tells me that something's wrong with how I'm thinking. And I love that. So if you want more like information on that too, I really encourage you to, as the listener, go check out some freaking secular Zen freaking meditation stuff. There's usually like a local like group that meets where you could do it safely during COVID and stuff. And you could just tune into like a Zoom session or whatever. And I've done that, like where I know where I'm dealing with something that's like really, 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 that's a lot, which is, you know, some of the reason too I haven't recorded in a bit. Like, I've been trying to deal with my own shit, like, and trying to just come at peace with it. And for me to be like, how do I manage the hate? And then how do I manage, you know, my self-love in a balanced way? Because it's really fucking hard for me, at least. I can be honest. Like, it's very hard for me to get in that mindset. It's
hard for everyone. I think it's something that's hard for all of us. You know, presence is a practice. It's not something that you just, you know, I mean, really, truly, it's not, you know, being a Zen master or a meditation master, any of that stuff, it takes time and effort as well, just as anything else. It's not something that you just, oh, I'm enlightened now and I can just do all these things. You know, it takes time. It takes time and effort and work, you know, in and of itself. And I'll just say I do the same thing. You know, I've kind of trained myself as well. If I'm getting ready to meditate or do contemplative prayer or just try to sit still for a minute, if I just can't get outside my head or outside my body in a healthy way, I have a chime on my altar that I'll click, I'll ding, whatever, you know, and that's like, and it literally affects you physically. Like when you're putting yourself into a practice like that, you're giving your body permission. Okay, I've heard this sound. My body's calm. My mind's calm. You know, it's something that's giving you permission to really become in the moment and become present. And
it's very
difficult. It is. And it's very difficult to reach that, you know, kind of, I don't know, peaceful space or just, you know, just kind of existing or being or whatever without some kind of, you know, ceremonious task, you know, whether that's, you know, a chime for you or if you do a chant of some sort, you know, or lighting a candle, you know,
burning
it's
incense.
All these very simple things. Yeah, all these very simple. And incense is great too, because that's a sensory thing. You know, you can smell it, you know, it just is a way to reset your brain and reset the way you think and just really help you get in the present moment. And so, yeah, presence is a practice, and I practice it as often as I can. Sometimes it's very hard to practice. I mean, I've definitely had moments where I've just like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meditate, you know, and it doesn't always work.
Oh my God.
You know,
I'm like,
it doesn't always
I will
work.
meditate today. I will meditate today. And then you're like, shit, I just cussed someone out again. Oh, fuck.
Yeah. And when you're in those situations, what's also important to remember is if you are having a hard time quieting your mind, quieting your body, if you're experiencing some really heavy emotions, walk through it. Don't use meditation as a, I don't know, a crutch. I don't know if that's the right word, but just
thinking of too.
Right. Don't like forcefully shove yourself into the situation where if it doesn't happen now, you're going to judge yourself and you're going to be disappointed because you're having feelings that you just need to sit with. You need to sit with those feelings. If you're angry, if you're distressed, if you're, hurt, sad, grieving, whatever it is, if that is big enough that it's really preventing you from being able to get into a space of calm, then you probably need to maybe see a therapist, and just give yourself permission to sit in those feelings, to sit in those emotions. The only way over is through. You've got to sit with those things and give yourself permission to feel what you need to feel. And once you do that and kind of do the work to get past those things, then the practice of presence becomes much easier.
And that's what I love, because the junkie mindset, which we have, is this whole like persona I feel like we've built up of a straw man of our own strength, our own abilities, our own mental fortitude for us to be able to deal with this shit. And the truth is, more shit has happened to us in this generation than has happened to any other one in the entire history of the world, because information moves faster than it has before in the world. Things hit you harder than they have before in the world, because everything is all interconnected anymore. There's no separation. There's no way you can unplug. And the thing is, like, not to say you need to go be a hermit and shit, but at the same point, like, there's a balance point of like, I need to just kind of get out of the city for a bit, or I kind of need to get out of this kind of field of energy that I'm in and just go somewhere different and just think about it somewhere else. And sometimes that's all it takes, is to break kind of a junkie mindset, is to kind of shift it up a little bit. And
absolutely.
In your mind, what would you say, like, what happened with you going from like junkie mindset of like anxiety, stress, which is anything dealing with anyone in my family normally. I
can relate.
Exactly. Like, what would you say, like, what was that journey for you like? Because I've seen you grow so much as a person in the last like so many years, and that's why like I look up to you the way that I do, because I'm like, if there's anyone, for the listener, if there's anyone who gets the struggle, it's Julie. Julie gets it, okay? In ways that you could not imagine, Julie gets it. And that's why I love talking with you about it. I'm like, I want to hear like what happened. Like, give me some road marks on like, this was a pretty big thing for me that caused my mindset to change about it. Is there anything that sticks out to you?
Like I said, I just go back to that, presence is practice. You have to practice presence. It is something that you have to be mindful of and you have to put work into. And I'll just kind of piggyback on what you were saying. If you are in a bad mental space and you need a break, changing your environment is the best thing you can do. Just like you said, get out of your house, get out of the office, get out of the city, whatever it is. And I'll also name, because I do feel this, I'm a person that doesn't really say absolutes very often, because there's a spectrum out there and everybody's different. And I love and appreciate and respect all of it. But for me personally, I will say as an absolute, nature is always the answer in those situations. If you are really struggling mentally, if you are feeling insanely overwhelmed, if you need a break, just stop what you're doing and just go for a walk. Just go outside, go somewhere that's beautiful, just give yourself permission to unplug, to detach, to walk away from whatever all these, gargantuan problems are that you're facing, and just go be outside, just go be in nature, or go be, for me, that's really, how I That's really how I commune with God. If I'm not meditating, if I'm outside, whether it's purposefully for meditative spiritual connection, or even if I'm just outside watching my kid play a soccer game, I'm looking at the sun and I'm feeling the sun. I feel the warmth on my skin. I'm looking at the grass and how beautiful it is. And, the wind, the cool, crisp wind, helping all of us feel a little bit cooler in the day, kinds of things. So those are things that are really important to have mindfulness about, because it's something that's usually available. You don't have to that's not something that you have to, I got to call my therapist, or I got to call my sponsor, or I got to call whoever and see what they tell me to do. Or, I got to come up with like a bullet point plan of how to deal with this. No, you can just stop. You can just stop and just give yourself permission to change your environment and just go be outside and just notice the things around you. And that practice for me has been extremely helpful when trying to come out of those bouts of really bad anxiety. For me too, I'll say, and I know this is true for you too, Tyler, you and I both come from families where mental illness is a thing and anxiety is very prevalent, and and all this performance-based stuff, it's harder to even come out of those things when you're brought up in it. I mean, that's your doctrine. If you're brought up in a family that's constantly producing, consuming, trying to meet goals and just constantly trying to be successful, or if you're in a family that's, maybe very codependent and has other mental health stuff that you feel like you have to control,
even manipulative kind of control that even some parents have on their kids, or vice versa. Like, it can be anyone in your family. Like, it doesn't need to be just your parents. Like, really, you're right. Like, the codependent thing is huge for anxiety things, because like you're stuck. You're literally stuck every day with this person that if you leave, you feel like they're going to hurt themselves. If you don't talk to them, they're going to do something. And that, like, people that are like, so like the morbid codependency on each other, like those type of relationships where you can't have your own space without that person interjecting in it, I feel like that's a red flag. Speaking, because 100%. Red flags have been trending a lot this week. So, like,
absolutely,
that's 7 or 8 red flags. Okay,
dealing with narcissism is so awful. I mean, it's you're constantly in a state of fear. My first husband, I've been married 3 times, just to name. I'm happily married now and love my spouse, and I'm so proud of the relationship that we have. But my first marriage, I was very much in a very, very toxic, codependent relationship with a narcissist, and he had his own trauma, and I think about him often. I haven't spoke to him in years and years, but I very much hope in my heart that someday, maybe, if it's happened or if it hasn't happened, maybe someday it will, that he will be able to step outside of himself and get help, because that poor individual had a lot of trauma that was never addressed, that was very much swept under the rug. And it creates those disorders and things like that. When you're just sitting on trauma your whole life and no one addresses it or deals with it or gives you permission to feel anything about it, creates these behavior complexes. But when I was with him, I mean, quite literally, it was my job to keep him breathing. He was constantly threatening suicide. Several times he would attempt to OD on things, over-the-counter meds, drinking with it. I mean, it was a very, very scary, toxic environment. But guess what? That's what I grew up in. So that's what I thought was normal. So I sought out my familiar, because that's what we do until we know better, And so, and with my parents, I mean, it was just a very codependent, like, one person, like, the idea of relationship that I saw growing up was it's one person's job to completely meet every need this other person has, to keep them alive, to keep them breathing, literally just keep them breathing. Like, your life and your well-being is my responsibility. That is a lie. That is not true on any level.
1000%.
Yeah. As adults, that's not true, at all. I mean, it's his job to create his own happiness. It's my job to create my own happiness. And we start leaning on each other too much for those things, yeah, it's going to create codependency and a lot of anxiety, even for both parties, because they're putting so much on you. They don't even feel like they have control over themselves because they put so much responsibility on you to make them feel whole, to make them feel at peace, to make them feel safe. And then you're just an empty vessel. Basically, at that point, you've just given up everything that you have, every spike of energy, every, vial of emotional capacity. It's all given away, And so you're like living on nothing. You're living as a skeleton. Like you're just doing for others consistently. And you're just, just like this frail zombie walking around, that has no space for themselves or anything. But you don't know until you know, and I was in those patterns for years and years. And really, I have to say, it wasn't until I left that marriage, and I was literally in a situation where I was like, if I stay, I'm going to die. I mean, that was truly the reality of the situation. He was very violent. We had weapons in the house. He was off the wall with mental health issues. And so, I mean, it was not safe. I was very much like, okay, does my life have any worth at all? And if it does, then I need to leave this marriage because this person is going to kill me in one way or another, either physically or mentally or whatever. Like, I'm going to end up in a really, really awful, terrible situation. And so I left. And when I did that, I had awareness of, I don't want to do this again. I don't want to be in these relationships anymore. And so I got therapy. That was my first, step into therapy. And I'll also name, I've been in therapy on and off for probably like 8 years now. I have like maybe a year or months or whatever where I'm doing okay. And then something happens, a trigger occurs, or, you just get in a really kind of messy, stressful, challenging point in your life and you need support and guidance and stuff. And I've basically accepted that I'm a person who needs to pretty much be in therapy most of the time. I mean, I'll consistently say that probably until I'm, old, dead and in the ground or whatever. I'm a person that really needs therapeutic support, and not just because of my trauma or my background, but because I'm an extremely empathetic person, and my coping mechanism is people pleasing, and it's so easy to get thrown into those traits, to get thrown into those cycles that you've been brought up in. And sometimes it happens to me even now. I'll have a new coworker or a new, friend coming in, a new person coming into my friend circle. And it's so crazy how fast you fall back into those cycles with a person who has those traits. And I mean, before you know it, you're just like, you're spinning out and you're stressed out and you're people pleasing and you're doing all these things. And then you're like, whoa, you're like, I've done so much work not to behave the way that I'm behaving now, not to feel the way that I'm feeling now. And I really need to step back and maybe decide, do I need to put distance between myself and this person? Do I just need to shift my thinking around, this person is not my responsibility. I'm responsible for me and no one else. And that's the reality of the situation. You are responsible for you and your happiness and your peace and your safety. And you're not important enough, and you don't have that much control to be able to provide that to anyone else other than yourself. And anybody who makes you think that you can or do, it's a lie and it's toxic, and you probably need to reevaluate the relationship that you're in, whether it's a romantic one, friendships, even coworkers, bosses, things like that. It's important to kind of step back and say, am I behaving the same way I was with my ex-husband or with my, horribly abusive narcissistic mother, or whatever the case is for you? That's part of our journey on this planet, I feel, is to, constantly, well, not constantly, because you don't want to stress yourself out over it, but just giving yourself permission and awareness to just kind of look objectively at things sometimes. Get out of the situation enough to where you could, like, if you, like, the situation that you're in, if it was a friend of yours, that you were watching, would you say, oh yeah, that's great, keep doing what you're doing? Or would you say, maybe you need to take a step back, or maybe you need to reevaluate, or maybe you need to get some support for yourself, or whatever it is? Because it's much easier for us to say those things and to be forgiving of other people than it is ourselves, more often than not. So
it's hard to put on that. It's so difficult. Like, the thing that I love with talking with you is that you make it the most reasonable thing to put yourself first. And it's so jarring the first time you hear it, because when you've been kind of reared in a Christian household, it makes it that much more difficult, in my opinion, as someone who was a pastor, as someone who was seeing people struggle with anxiety constantly after my sermons. And I would think to myself, Jesus said, don't be anxious. And I'm like, so if Jesus said, don't be anxious, then why the fuck do most of the things that we hear about coming from any kind of religion, mostly, it feels like, is generally geared at how fucked we are, on how inadequate we are in comparison to God, how inadequate we are, with just doing basic shit every day. And it gets exhausting. It just it wears me down even thinking about it. And I'm thinking to myself, there's two versions of me. And that was the biggest thing that I remember going to you about, was when I told you first that I was gay. And I'm like, I feel like there's two versions of me. There's the version that I can talk to you about and I could talk to Julie about, right? That's what I'm talking about. That I could actually be honest with Julie. And because of you were honestly the biggest factor, apart from my boyfriend, in pushing me to be honest about it, to give me permission. And I remember when you told me that, it rocked my fucking mind. It's such that phrase, it's powerful, because the thing is, you feel like you're not supposed to, but the thing is, who's telling you that? Who's your biggest enemy? Most of the time it's you, or it's a figment of your imagination. If you think it's a spiritual being or whatever, that's okay. But the thing is, regardless of what you believe or not, you have permission as the listener. You have permission as the anxiety junkie to actually be like, I have permission to not deal with this type of shit being talked about with me. I have permission to mute it. I have permission to fucking turn it off. I don't need to subject myself to this. And if that's... Definitely. And, for me, it was an abusive pastor that was, and I've talked about him before, verbally abusive, spiritually abusive.
I just want to name a PSA real quick. Pastors are not mental health experts, okay? Yes. Pastors and, religious, administrators and things like that. Yes, I believe that, they want to help and they want to support, and there are spaces and times where they can, and it is helpful. But pastors are not mental health experts. And if you're struggling with anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, a whole number of things, you want to go talk to your pastor, that's fine. But if you leave feeling worse than when you started talking to him, you need another outlet. That's not helpful. You're just going to keep churning your wheels. You're just going to stay in the cycle. You really need someone who can give you a new perspective and a new understanding of yourself. And just like Tyler's saying, you have permission to seek support in whatever that looks like for you. If it is a pastor you want to talk to, great. If you feel like maybe you need a little bit more, go talk to a clinician, some people who are actually trained and versatile in supporting mental health needs, because pastors are not, and I do have a soft spot in my heart for pastors in the church, because I grew up with them. They have so much expectation on them. So much expectation is put on them by the church and the doctrine that they're supposed to know the answers for everything, for everyone. And if they don't, then it's, well, you need to pray about it. And you need to listen to what God has to say and stuff. And there's time and space for that too. But sometimes we really need a physical person putting a hand out and pulling us out of the ditch, pulling us out of the hopelessness, pulling us out of, giving us real tools and skills to help, get ourselves out of those pits, because it's easy to fall into, and it doesn't make you a bad person. And you are allowed, you have permission to support yourself in whatever way that you see fit.
if you needed a mental health hall pass to take care of yourself, Julie and I have just signed your mental health hall pass for you. You have permission. Please get out of there. Wherever you're at, get out of there. If you do not feel better, get out of there. Like I love that, because if I would have been told that years ago, I probably was. But the thing is, like, I wasn't ready myself to want to get help, or I wasn't ready to deal with my own anxiety, because I just felt like it was the world around me that was causing me stress, not me. And the thing is that, yeah, the world is stressful. Of course it is. Like, that's why we need shit to fucking keep functioning. But like, I get that. But at a certain point, though, really the biggest shit that affects you is what's in your immediate surrounding. Like that's the biggest thing that's going to affect you, in my opinion, is who's around you, who you're letting into these safe spaces with you.
Absolutely. And just to name, I'm sure a lot of us have maybe like seen this in memes or on social media. I know I have, but this is something I really try to remember, because I was in a very similar circumstance like this, where I had to kind of shift my thinking. But if a flower is suffering, or if a flower is dying, or if it's not getting what it needs, do you cut the flower? Do you just pull the flower? No, kill it. You change the environment in which it's in. You start watering it. You give it more water. You do what you need to do. You don't just kill the thing. Does that make sense? I feel like I didn't do a very good job. Do you get what I'm saying?
It's very, like, I like how you put that, though, because the truth about it is that a lot of us really think that it's a one-stop fix. Oh, once I take Lexapro, which I take Lexapro, which shout out Lexapro, thank you. It's like it's definitely helpful. But whenever people are like, oh, if I just take this medication, whatever, like that, one and done, don't have to worry about my environment, but boom, done. That's the same thing to me as just picking up the flower and just grabbing a new one from Home Depot. It doesn't work like that. Like it shouldn't work like that in nature, at least. Like there's things that will happen naturally. Of course, we get it, but geez, like you have to really change your environment around you if you want to stay clean of anxiety junkiness. Yes, that's the thing. Like, you want to be clean, fucking adjust your contacts. That's the first step. What would I tell any junkie that I would see on the street? And and I'm not using it as like a pejorative term or whatever like that, because I consider myself one. So I'm like, totally. That's what it is. But I'm like, I really feel that there's a lot of people that are in that boat with you, where you're like, well, it's not getting better. How do I know that I should even continue doing this shit? And that's the thing I get a lot is, okay, I went to therapy once and it's not working. Well, I watered the flower once, but it's not fixing it yet. Well, it takes time. It's a process.
It is.
And I feel like that's what you're saying. Where it's a process of change, not an overnight thing that doesn't fix most of the problems. And I love too that you brought up nature as an example in that. Look at nature. Look around you. Do things get fixed overnight all the time? No. We've come from millions of years of freaking evolution and all this other stuff. This is, trust me, like, this is not a quick process. Do you think we got here just like that? No. Like, maybe some people
millions of years, yes. Evolution trying over and over again. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, like, our whole history is based on the entire ecosystem fucking itself. Like, that's, what do you think is going to happen? Like, it's not going to be an instant thing. And why would you put that kind of expectation on your therapist too? Like, trust me, if your therapist is dealing with your ass, give your therapist some time. If he's dealing with me, we're going to need more than freaking 10 sessions. I can tell you that, to start unpacking stuff. And the thing is too, like, I just encourage you, like, for those that are in therapy or seeking therapy, the whole point of why we're trying to keep it lighthearted is to try to tell you too, like, go to therapy. It's not scary. It's not bad. It will actually help you. This isn't something that we're paid for as an ad.
Yeah.
So like go and talk to whoever you are comfortable with that will honestly evaluate your mental health condition in a positive way. Like not giving you just like say 10 Hail Marys and then freaking 3 Our Fathers and that's it. That's not how it works to fix things.
No, it's really not. And if you're a person that's really struggling with, the sense of self-judgment around your choices or your struggles or whatever it is that is for you that you feel like you might need support for, a practice that I've started doing for myself that I find very helpful is, because I am consistently self-judgmental. It's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
Like I put so many expectations on myself that no one has put on me because I'm, people pleasing and seeking perfection all the time. And I have to be perfect. And that's just my mindset that I'm, it's my daily struggle is to keep that mindset in check. Instead of judging everything you're doing and saying, is this bad? Was this wrong? Just ask yourself, is this human? Is this human? Is this experience human? Was that choice human? And more than likely, you're going to say, yeah. And, when I started doing that, it just really gave me, again, further permission to look at myself with compassion and look at myself with forgiveness and understanding. We're all just humans. We are not perfect. As a parent, I say, I say this to myself all the time because, when you're a perfection seeking people pleaser and you become a parent, that can become really challenging to keep in check. And so what I'm constantly telling myself is like, I'm human. I'm human. I'm a human being and I'm raising this child. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to fuck up from time to time. There is no perfect parent. There is no perfect employee, imperfect brother, sister, parent, whatever that title is for you. There is no such thing as perfection around anything, in the human experience. I'm raising this child. I'm going to fail. I'm going to falter. I'm going to have, bad days. I'm going to get tired. I'm going to get frustrated. I'm going to yell sometimes. This is part of the human experience. And it, just having awareness of being able to be compassionate and kind to yourself as you're growing, as you're able to name these things. Because what happens is if you're not able to be compassionate and forgiving to yourself when you're having these experiences, you're just creating more and more judgment. You're creating more and more of a boundary between you and yourself, really, first of all, and then also a boundary of, and then do you want to perpetuate that onto your kids, that everything has to be perfect and that you have to constantly be successful and that you constantly have to be, performing and all of this stuff? No, I think if we really give ourselves permission to sit still for a minute, we all want the same thing, which is to just feel that we're whole and enough on our own. And your living is your divine right to that, I believe. Your divine right is your authenticity and your peace. And there's nothing that you need to do to earn that.
I love that. Your divine right, because it is. Because the thing is, at the end of the day, all that we know for sure is that what's here now. That's what we know. The thing is that we can't see the future. We don't know the shit. But the thing is that we know one thing is that we've been put here for whatever reason you may think. But whatever it is, I believe that it's not just by happenstance that we're here. I don't think that you're just here by a mistake. I don't think you're just here to not have some kind of enlightenment. Like everyone is here on their own journey, on their own path. And the thing is, like, that is divine. Like, you want to know what divinity really is? Divinity is ascending above the human plane. That's what it means, right? That's what we're talking about. Like, this is something too that I believe we all have, which is, do you have a soul? Do you have a spirit? Right? In my opinion, then I believe then you have that divine part in you too. And that's what I think you were alluding to earlier too. Like, we have that. We're all in one, all encompassing, whatever you want to call it, whatever. All I know is that I'm way more connected with random things in nature sometimes than I am with other people. That just sometimes it works like that. Sometimes you just need to freaking just kind of eliminate the situation that you're in by just kind of maybe adjusting a little bit of how you do the divine. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Just maybe. So it's not this big scary Old Testament God. The thing is, if you want to see what divinity looks like, in my opinion, look no further than people that are helping at local homeless shelters. You want to see that shit? You want to see people that actually, like, you want to see something divine? See people giving up of their money to make sure a kid eats. That kind of shit. That's divine to me. That's divinity. Divinity is like, it's that spark of life. And when you see people that love what they do, that's divine. That's what it is. Like, everybody, it's so ethereal for religion. But the thing is like, it's not really that ethereal. It's right here. It's what we can see too. Absolutely. That's divine. The divine is intertwined with everything that we are and do. Yes. So that's why I love what you said. Like, that's your divine right. Because you know what? Who gives a fuck at the end of the day if you believe in a God or not? The thing is that you're the God of your own universe right now, as far as I'm concerned. And why not build the world that you want to live in? And why not build it with people that are actually going to appreciate you for the divine spark and the divine being that you really are? And if you don't think that you have that either, please listen just for a quick second, because you do. And I believe you do, as a listener, have that ability. Because have you ever made someone light up by talking to them? Even once? Has that ever happened? Have people been encouraged just by seeing you? Ever? And yes, you have it too. And even if you don't think that, I don't want you to go away, so I think you have it. How about that?
Well, I think what's important to remember, and I mean, this, we're all just speaking from our own experience and our own belief system and things like that. But, we are, every person listening right now, you are a blueprint of God's love, exactly the way that you are. Nothing needs to be earned. Your wholeness is your divine right. Your peace is your divine right. You're already whole. There's nothing that you need to do or achieve. Another thing that I feel like really comes into play with anxiety is comparison. We compare ourselves to others and the success of others or the beauty of others or whatever that is. Comparison is always the thief of joy. That is something that I've learned on this path of trying to overcome anxiety and stuff, because a lot of it is just constantly feeling I'm not enough. I need to be something else. I need to be more. I need to be what this person is. And so constantly comparing yourself to others just robs you of all your own beauty, of all your own individual traits that just make you the beautiful blueprint of God's love that you are. And nature is a beautiful example of this. Does a flower tell a bird, I wish you were a tree? Does a rock say to itself, I wish I was a bird? No. Everything in nature is just so beautifully as it is, as it's intended, as its own being. There's no comparison in nature. Do you look at a flower and say, I wish you were a bird? Do you look
Of course not.
No, we're with nature, we're able to be much more forgiving and say, oh, look at this beautiful flower or this beautiful tree or this beautiful whatever, and just love and accept it as it is. Why can't we do that for ourselves? Why is it so hard to do that for the most beautiful, complex creatures on this earth, which is ourselves? We need to be able to have permission and compassion and forgiveness and love. And not only all those things, but really a sense of, celebration for the creatures that we are, for what we have to bring to the world and our families and ourselves and our careers. You're a whole light in and of yourself. You're a whole universe inside your heart. And you have so much to offer just by breathing, just by being here.
It's infinite possibilities that you can come up with in your mind, in my opinion. Because the thing is, if you don't believe it, look around you. All of this was at one time not here. All of the whole concept of anything that we're using right now, it was come up by somebody. Somebody invented this shit. So somebody had the spark enough, in my opinion, to be like, I want to make my own thing. I want to do my own thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let other limitations stop me, or people even saying that they can't do it. That's what I love, is that like they did it anyways. It's like, and I'm
do
like,
it anyways. Yep.
Do it anyways. Like, even if you're not sure, fucking do it anyways.
Do it anyway.
Like,
Yeah.
do it. I was like, but my last question I wanted to ask you here before we wrap things up is that, are some people unhelpable? So, like, are some people beyond the point of help, in your opinion?
No, never. I personally don't ever believe that. I feel like the pathways to health and wellness and the pathways to self-acceptance and peace is harder for some than others. I feel like that's appropriate and honest to say. But do I feel that any person anywhere is a lost cause? Absolutely not. You are not a lost cause. You are not so far gone that no one can put a hand down and help you up. That is a lie. That's not true. And it starts with you. You know, there also has to be a willingness within the person to really want to seek help, you know, and a lot of that just comes with self-esteem, because so much, you know, when you've struggled for so long, it's so easy for us to just get in these pits of depression and I'm not even worth saving. I'm not even worth, you know, and so that becomes, you know, a challenge a hurdle that you have to get over. Actually, I am. You are worth the effort for you to put into yourself so that you can be the best person that you are, the best version of yourself. And when I say version, really all I mean is the most authentic you. You deserve to be the most authentic you, whatever that looks like for you. It's beautiful and it's not bad. You know, whatever you were put here on this earth to do or be or feel is divine. I truly believe that. And you know, our culture and our world and our families and our careers and this idea of success, you know, a lot of those things just, you know, just smother it. Just smother that, you know, these senses of, you know, individuality and uniqueness. And, you know, maybe you have different ideas about things than the people around you. And I would just say, if again, going back to permission, if no one's ever given you permission to do those things, I give you permission to pursue whatever it is that your heart needs to feel whole. Because, you know, those are the things that really make us at peace, you know, or like when you were saying, like, have you ever seen somebody who just loves what they do? That's divine, you know, someone who is just living their purpose. And, you know, and it's different for everyone. It doesn't look the same for all of us. You know, what a boring, you know, silly world it would be if we were all doing the same thing all the time. Like, that's why comparison is so stupid when you think about it. You know, like comparing yourself to others, it's such a stupid concept. You are not put here, you know, to be a carbon copy of your CEO or your mother or whatever, you know. Thank you God. Are here to be you and to,
Which sometimes is both. Sometimes it's the CEO mom, but you know, but in all seriousness though, like, you know, of course I love her to death, but it's really, I love that shit though. I love that shit, because if you really are a divine being, then you're not unhelpable. You're not. The thing is that you have unlimited options on what to do. The thing is, like, we get this tunnel vision where we forget, it almost like we forget who we really are.
Yeah.
Like we forgot.
Yeah, tunnel vision is so dangerous. I mean, when we get to those points where we just feel like we can't get outside of ourselves or the circumstance or the situation, then you're already trapped. There's nowhere to go. If you have that thinking, you have to break free of that thinking, because it's not true. There's always a new path you can take. There's always a new way of thinking that you can obtain, and there's things that you can overcome. No one is trapped. Anyone listening, if you feel trapped in any way, in shape or form, mentally, physically, you know, trapped in your job, trapped in your relationship, trapped in your, you know, you are not trapped. You have infinite possibilities. You can make choices as you need for yourself. And if no one's given you permission to do things that feel right for you, I give you permission to do those things, because you're not helping anyone by dumbing yourself down or trying to fit into this box. You know, I very much believe that we're here as a communal species. You know, if you're looking divinely, like we are mirrors of each other's goodness. I really feel like that's the intent of this sense of camaraderie and oneness. I want to be a mirror of your goodness. And so often in my life, when I have not been able to see my own goodness, it's been other people who have been able to mirror to me. Actually, Julie, you're an incredible person because, maybe you've done this, or you've, overcome this thing, or, whatever. It's so easy for us to just put this lens of just worthlessness on ourselves, and it's just how beautiful that we have this other, the sense of other, we're all the same, but we're all uniquely different. That's kind of the paradox of, spiritual oneness, is like, there's the other, and then there's the one, which includes you as yourself, but also the whole as a piece. When you heal yourself, you're healing the whole. When you invest in yourself, you're investing in all of humanity. I mean, truly,
Exactly.
That's really what it comes down to. And so, maybe, and that was very helpful for me when I kind of came to those realizations, because I'm such an empathic person. I'm always thinking of every perspective but my own in terms of things. And so that perspective was very helpful for me when I started.
I like that a lot.
Things. Yeah.
And I guess just to kind of wrap it up here, like, I just want to say, like, on behalf of the countless people that you're going to help with this advice, because it's true, and I'm going to speak it out there into existence in my own world too, because that's something that I needed to hear today. Like, I swear to God, every time I talk to you, I'm like, I wish I could just take Julie. Do I sound like mom yet? I just wish I could take it. That's how my mom sounds. I'm not joking. I just wish I could take Julie with me everywhere I go. And consult Julie, which I guess I can. I can text Julie. But if you have that feeling after hearing Julie, which I'm sure you will, that if you ever need to connect, please connect with us. We want to guide you in the right direction. Hey, we're not your therapist, but we can point you to one.
Yeah.
Hey, we may not be able to solve all your problems, but hey, we can listen. And the thing is, like, I love this show because of its focus on the listener and its focus on, like, actual people's freaking problems. And that's the thing. Like, I just want you to know that, like, you Julie are a lifeline for me. And I don't know where I would be at, or if I would be here if not for you, in so many different ways. And and I mean that because,
I'm so flattered. You're gonna make me cry.
I'm like, it wouldn't be an episode, Julie, without us almost crying at the end. So,
Yep. We didn't.
That's how we know.
Crying by the end of the show.
You just know that we love you. We love having you on here. I love having you on my show. I love what you say. I love the passion that you speak it from, because, again, like I said, if you really don't think Julie's been through it, Julie's been through it. Okay. Like, if you're having a bad day and don't think that Julie's been through it, Julie's been through it. Okay. So if you ever need a reality check, trust me. Julie was a snake handler. Okay. I'm not joking. When I say Julie's done it all, Julie's done it all. So
I truly do. I feel like I have more life experience than any 34-year-old person has any business having. I feel like I've lived about 10 different lives. But it's, for many of us, it's what we have to do to kind of come to these truths. You kind of have to attack things from so many different perspectives and just give yourself permission to find out what works. And sometimes things do and sometimes things don't, and if they don't, then okay, let's just take another route here. Let's move in a different direction. You're never stuck. That's something else I just want to say again. You are never stuck. You're never trapped. You have infinite possibilities within you. There's a whole world of resources out there for you. Please connect with us if we can help or support in any way, whether that's providing resources or just listening. We are truly here for you.
Yeah, and we'll put Julie's information as well, where you can connect as well and give her a follow as well, and where you can find us as well at Religion Recovery. I just want to say thank you again for Back Home Media for allowing me the opportunity to host this today. And Julie, thank you as always. You have been a joy that has brought so much light into my life, and I'm glad to see where this goes to bring many other people that same light. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear friend. And thank you, my friends, for listening. Namaste.
Thank you, guys.
Well, I don't think it, I thought it, that's different. I said what I said and I meant it, or lamented. Words given weight without thought, and I'm cursing the way that I talk and the way that I ought to be able to pause and to say that the fault can be placed on my arms. I display for assault, to disgrace in this arm. Pray for the day they could wait for the calm. You can't control the storm, only weather it, whether it's 5 weeks and 5 days of rain sideways, or scorched earth, search for death, or water left with all the thorns, with the petals gone, settle on the breath of autumn. If the ground fits, wear it, the crown fits.